After a day in London by myself, it was time for the group to gather for the first time and begin experiencing various countries and cultures of Europe.
Square, you have some of the greatest politicians along here. All right, we're just coming through West London here. Where you guys have been located is in the western side of London. We're going to drive across London this morning. I'm sure some of you had a beautiful, glorious day of English weather. Didn't you? Yesterday wasn't a fantastic day? I live in London, but in the south. Go past where fantastic museum, the Victoria and Albert. I haven't come past here for quite some time. It hasn't changed. Lots of kids, they have ice rinks at the time of winter out the front. And you can go skating. Of course, it's artificially created. Now, if you here to the right-hand side, look on here, you can see an arch. Yep, to the right. That's Wellington. And later on today, there'll be bluebirds over the White Cliffs of Dover.
The day started very early, 4 a.m., so we could drive to the White Cliffs of Dover to cross the English Channel and into France by ferry. On this particular day, we would be in 4 different countries, with Amsterdam being our final destination. What is the Netherlands famous for? Yes, their windmills. No, not these. These are common all over Europe. There are not as many old-fashioned windmills, but we were lucky enough to see a few. Amsterdam is the capital and the largest city in the Netherlands. The Netherlands, not Holland. But it is not the home of the government and parliament, even though Amsterdam has a royal palace. This honor goes to Hague. Amsterdam is probably the most planned city in the world. Its planning dates back to the 1200s, while Rome, Paris, and many other places existed before Amsterdam. The area and formation are totally different. In fact, if you think of places like New York City and Atlanta, whose growth in such a short time is astronomical, their planning does not compare. Today, places like Venice and New Orleans consult with Amsterdam on how to preserve their cities. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to the beginning. Amsterdam began as a small fishing village in the 12th century. In the 13th century, a dam was built on the river Amstel, lending its name to the city of Amsterdam, which would eventually become Amsterdam. Amsterdam would not remain a small village for long. During the following centuries, its size would grow exponentially. What is Amsterdam known for? Yes, I know. It makes beer and it has a red light district. But it's called Venice of the North, not because of these, but for its canals. Even though Amsterdam began as a small fishing village, its citizens needed protection. This protection came in the form of a dam to prevent water from flooding the city. Canals were originally dug for water management and defense. In the 17th century, Amsterdam would expand by 4 to 5 times, requiring more canals. As canals were built, the city would continue to grow. Eventually, the canals would serve as a means of transportation of goods rather than a defense. Canals are not like roads, hence the careful designing process of the city. Remember, we are in times before plumbing and electricity, as you know it today. Amsterdam consists of about 100 islands and 165 canals. Remember, the canals were dug. You see some cars, don't you? Imagine months of sweating and back-breaking agony to dig a trench for a canal, only to have it filled to make a road for a car. If you think this is bad, what do you think when I tell you it was about 75 canals that were filled? Venice and New Orleans consult with Amsterdam due to its ingenious water management design, which prevents the city from flooding. However, there is more to the water management system than damming of the water. I was surprised to learn of the impact that Napoleon had on Europe during my trip. In fact, Napoleon appointed his brother, Louis, as King of Holland in 1806. King Louis, or King Louis, converted the town hall into a royal palace of Amsterdam, where he would become the only king to live in Amsterdam. You see, back in those days, water in the canals was stagnant and unclean. This resulted in probably the first filling of a canal. While King Louis was living in the royal palace, the stench of the water bothered his wife, so he ordered it to be filled. Before electricity and gas, windmills helped circulate the water, but obviously were rendered useless without wind. Eventually, a steam-powered station was built to circulate water for flushing the canals. Years later, a sewage system was incorporated into the city's design. Houses and houseboats were connected to the sewage system rather than dumping directly into the canals. Are you interested in hearing about the buildings along the canal? As mentioned, the royal palace began as the town hall before King Louis transformed it into a palace. It remains a palace, hosting state visits and other royal occasions, such as New Year's receptions, galas, dinners, and award ceremonies. I did not have time to visit the palace, but it is open to visitors. Unique in their design, the houses are very tall and narrow. Why are Amsterdam's canal houses so narrow? Do you think it has anything to do with the Dutch being so tall? Are you wondering if it is because the land is scarce and expensive? What do you think is a byproduct of narrow houses? Are you thinking narrow staircases? Are you imagining carrying furniture up the stairs? One thing we know for sure is that, again, planning was put into the design. Have you noticed the houses are crooked or leaning? Do you think they resemble the Leaning Tower of Pisa? No, I will not be discussing this. It is one of the few places I did not visit, even though I would have liked to. So why do they tilt? Again, because of forethought in the designing of the city. Imagine the house being perfectly straight. To address getting furniture to the upper floors, a hoisting hook is attached at the top of the building. The hoisting hook is small, but the furniture is large or long and swings while being lifted. Imagine spending good money on a brand new, pristine leather couch or a grand piano, only to have it placed inside the house with a long, gaping gouge that is visible to you and your guests before you even use the item. Another reason for the lean has to do with the buildings of the houses on wooden pilings or poles, the degradation of the wooden base or its weakening with nearby growth construction projects. For that matter, simple reservation of your house might cause it to tilt. With limited time in Amsterdam, I did not visit one of the most famous houses in the world. But while cruising the canals in a boat, I was able to catch a glimpse of it. Do you remember me talking about World War II in the London video? Being a world war, Amsterdam would not be spared, for on May 10, 1940, the Germans invaded the Netherlands. A young girl, a courageous family, a discriminated people would give rise to the Anne Frank House. It's now a museum with a story through which you can personally relive the experience in the quotes, photos, videos, and more around the house. 80 years ago, on the 6th of July, 1942, the Frank family went into hiding in the building in Amsterdam. It was not just the Frank family, but other families as well. Unlike Venice, numerous bicycles line the roads or canals, while many ride bikes. Cars are now often used for transportation. Can you imagine narrow roads and a never-ending supply of water? Parking in New York is probably a breeze or a piece of cake compared to parking in Amsterdam. What reaction would you expect to receive if you walked into your house and said, "Hi, honey. I forgot to put the parking brake on." Luckily, only a few cars end up in the canal compared to tens of thousands of bikes. Before turning in for the night, let's just take a relaxing stroll along the streets. Tomorrow, we will head to Germany. We anticipated walking into the Cologne Cathedral, but we're in for a surprise.